Hello and welcome to the JimRPG Show. It's June the 12th, 2020, and we've got a big show coming up. Sony today, they revealed their PlayStation 5 games, and they also revealed what their hardware is going to look like. And so we've dedicated the whole show today to discuss the PlayStation 5 and what they showed off. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. Now, they decided to reveal their hardware last, but we're going to reveal it first, and it looks a bit like this. So that's basically what it looks like, and as you can see, it's a very contrasting looking design. You've got the black and white contrasting differences, and you've got the very thin white piece at the top, sandwiching the thicker black main body of the PlayStation 5, and it's actually the reverse at the bottom, where it's much thicker for the white part, and the body of the black part is much thinner at the bottom. Now, as you can see, they've got they're still using discs for the PlayStation 5, and I don't know if you can see, but there is one USB-A port and one USB-C port. And you can also see in the close-up, there are two smaller, I guess, what you would call, well, actually at first I thought they were ports, so maybe they were SD card slots or something, but I asked online, and a lot of people seem to think that these are the power and eject buttons, because they've decided to come out with a non-disc version, basically a digital version of the PlayStation 5, and it's missing one of those buttons. So it looks to be that one of these is a power button and one of these is a eject button for the disc. Now, so this is official, and I guess what this really means is that Sony really see growth in the digital market, and that they can get away with putting a console out there without a disc. And that makes a lot of sense, because as you can see with PCs, I don't think anybody who plays on PC still uses the disc drive. For myself personally, I haven't been using discs the entire generation. So this makes a lot of sense, and this also means that users are going to be shopping on the PlayStation Store a lot more if they don't have the choice. So pushing this is in the interest of Sony, who are going to get a lot more profit margin from having a digital version of the console, because they control the PlayStation Store. There is no other store on the PlayStation 5 console. Now, third parties can still sell their game codes on their, I guess, online store, but on the console itself, there is only one PlayStation Store. So I think this is an ominous sign for retail, knowing that Sony is moving in the direction of going discless in the future. Now, perhaps maybe PlayStation 6 will still continue to have a disc, but the days of actually having the game on the disc are pretty much over, and the disc really is used just to make sure that you actually purchase the game. So it's kind of like a CD key of some sorts. And I think, retailers, of course, they're still going to be selling the PlayStation 5, because they will just trade whatever that is able to be moved, products that are able to be moved. So if customers demand PlayStation 5, they will trade that. But I think if you were a I guess electronic store holder, you would consider to diversify your business, because it would be much harder to sell retail games in the future. It definitely seems like software will go digital, and there's going to be less physical software from now on. So that was probably the biggest surprise of the show, that they had two versions of the PlayStation 5. One that is a discless version and one with a disc. Now, I assume with the disc, you're probably also going to be able to play movies, Blu-ray movies on the disc. So there is still some use for the disc version, but in terms of gaming, a lot of the time these days, the disc is just used as a key to make sure you purchase the game. As we've seen before, they also showed off the controller. I think it was only unofficial. I don't recall, but yeah, we can finally see that it's a white and black design that kind of mirrors the actual console design. And it's going to come out with a charging station accessory. Now, this is not going to be bundled. I highly doubt that it will be bundled with the actual console. Usually they just sell the console with one controller and the console itself. So this will be something you have to purchase separately. Now this kind of worried me. So they also revealed a camera. So obviously they're still heavily into streaming and sharing online. But it says it's an HD camera. Now I'm a little bit worried. I hope it's full HD. I don't know if that really matters too much for people who want to have their little, I guess, second screen to show their reactions. If it's going to be just used for that, then it doesn't really matter that it's an HD camera. But a lot of people use these cameras for, I guess, chat shows. Actually, when the PlayStation 4 first launched, people were using these cameras to do chat shows online. So I think it's a little bit concerning if it's just an HD. Hopefully it is full HD. And it would be great if it was 4K, but we probably shouldn't get our hopes up. Now, Sony have been touting their 3D audio capabilities of the PlayStation 5 a lot. So they have a 3D audio dedicated chip inside the PlayStation 5, and this was revealed in the Mark Cerny PlayStation 5 hardware architecture reveal. And the 3D chip allows you to do much more than a dedicated audio chip allows you to do much more 3D audio processing versus if you were actually just to do it off the CPU. And using the CPU, that would actually reduce the amount of threads that you could use for actual, I guess, gameplay. So they've been touting their 3D audio capabilities, and I guess using this wireless headset, it will probably, I guess, be well suited to seeing the 3D audio capabilities of the PlayStation 5. Now, the PlayStation 4, a lot of PlayStation fans were not happy that it didn't come with a media remote and that they had to use the controller to, I guess, use, I think it's got Netflix, but if they wanted to watch videos, they had to use their controller. And now, finally, seems like Sony have listened to the fans and released a media remote for the PlayStation 5, meaning that we're probably going to get a lot of media apps such as Netflix on the PlayStation 5. There's no reason not to. And also Sony have their own, they do sell their own movies and music on their store as well. So that's what they revealed today. They revealed a disc-based PlayStation 5 console, or what it looks like, and they revealed a discless digital version, PlayStation 5 only, and with some accessories. So Anna, they posted a comparison of the PlayStation 4 Pro versus the PlayStation 5, and as you can see, the PlayStation 5 is just going to be much bigger than the PlayStation 4, which makes a lot of sense because the CPU is much bigger now. They had some issues with the PlayStation 4 Pro in terms of thermals and heat dissipation. So if you make the case larger, you're just going to get a lot more air circulation in the system. And with the higher clocks now of the PlayStation 5, particularly with the CPU, which is running at 3.5 gigahertz, and the GPU running at 2.2 gigahertz, yeah, it's just going to get a lot hotter. It's basically like your PC. Yeah, with a larger case, you just get more air circulation. You can put in bigger fans and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's don't expect some micro, tiny little console. No, the PlayStation 5 got bigger because it's going to be a lot more powerful than the previous generation. Now, we've just seen that we've seen the console mainly standing up, but there was a tiny shot, like maybe for like half a second long, in the trailer that they showed the console on its side in the horizontal position. And I guess so this is what it looks like on its side. And personally for me, like if you're talking about what it looks like and if I actually like the design or not, and there is just too much contrast in the design of this. It seems to be very bold. It's got the white, the black, and then the thick and the thin, the curvature. It kind of just looks like architecture rather than a, I guess, piece of electronics. I don't know. Tell me what you guys think of the design down below in the comments. Do you like the design of the PlayStation 5? For me personally, it doesn't look that great, but I don't hate it. But you know, ultimately it's just a box, it's a case anyway, so as long as you enjoy the games, I don't think the design of it actually matters too much. So on to the games, and the actual first thing that they revealed today was Grand Theft Auto 5 for the PlayStation 5. This was probably the biggest disappointment of the whole show, because we've already had Grand Theft Auto 5 for PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4, and not to mention the entire trailer that they show was basically the PlayStation 4 version. And yes, they made a distinction that this was on PlayStation 4 and all the games afterwards were going to be PlayStation 5, but this was something that wasn't really that exciting. We knew that it would probably get some sort of remaster or remake of some sort, like not remake, but something that was enhanced for PlayStation 5, because there are just too many people playing Grand Theft Auto for them to just leave it on PlayStation 4. They want all their users to move to PlayStation 5. And as we've talked about on the show before, there are Grand Theft Auto 5 has sold 130 million copies. That's like got to be in the top 5 number of copies for a game sold of all time. So yeah, there's a ton of people playing this, and it would be a mistake if they didn't put Grand Theft Auto 5 on PlayStation 5. So this was the best screen grab that I could get for Spider-Man, the new Spider-Man for PlayStation 5. I was grabbing all of these screenshots from the actual show stream, so anything that was really moving fast would end up being quite blurry. But because there's only a couple of screenshots, I don't think it matters that much. The new Spider-Man, and also it's going to be coming out at the end of the year. So they said it was holiday 2020, and it's going to have a black Spider-Man. Now, I don't know the lore of Spider-Man well at all, but of course I know that there's Peter Parker, so I don't know how this character fits in with the Spider-Man universe. I think that's really exciting and fresh, though, that they're looking at different, I guess, ways of expanding diversity, and this is brilliant how they've used Spider-Man for this. And you know, this game, it's going to come out near launch, so I think that's really exciting. And the game will be called Spider-Man Miles Morales. Again, I don't know about Miles Morales, so this is something to look forward to. Now, the next game that they revealed was Gran Turismo 7. And as you know, with Gran Turismo, they released Gran Turismo Sport on the PlayStation 4, and the previous numbered title, Gran Turismo 6, was actually on the PlayStation 3. So I think what happened with Gran Turismo was that initially they intended it to be an online car racing simulator, and it got a lot of poor feedback during the review period, saying that it was online, and there were only a limited number of tracks, and there were also a limited number of people playing, because on console you needed the PlayStation Plus membership to play, and you have to pay like $50 a year. So then they very quickly added a campaign mode to the Gran Turismo Sport, and since then it's done really well, because it got people buying the game, and then afterwards they would purchase the PlayStation Plus membership to play online. So if you lock people out first, they're not going to come. So I think that's what they learned. And this game, the step up from Gran Turismo 6 to Gran Turismo Sport, meant that it took a long time for them to develop this game. So I think Gran Turismo 6 came out at near the end of the PlayStation 3 cycle, probably around 2012 somewhat. And there was a lot of fuss about how it took forever for Gran Turismo Sport to come out. And when it did come out, I guess like 5 or 6 years later, it was a very, I guess, truncated version of Gran Turismo 6. It felt like it left some of the stuff out, like the campaign and stuff. So what we're really seeing now is we're seeing Gran Turismo 7, and I think in their mind they probably had that all along, that Sport was going to be a smaller version because it was going to take them quite a long time to develop, but they wanted to do multiplayer first, and then 7 was going to be their like full Gran Turismo game. So Gran Turismo 7, that's why it's coming out so early, because essentially, from at least what it looks like from what they've shown, is that they've taken a lot of the stuff from Gran Turismo Sport over into Gran Turismo 7. In terms of how much better it looks, because in the past Gran Turismo games have always just outdone each previous version on the previous console. So Gran Turismo 3 and 4 look better than 1 and 2, and 5 and 6 look better than 3 and 4. This is really Gran Turismo Sport and Gran Turismo 7, you could kind of see them sort of like the same level, and they're much better than Gran Turismo 5 and 6. Essentially, Gran Turismo 7 is like the next half step from Gran Turismo Sport. And you know, watching this trailer, you can kind of feel that a lot of it feels, and I was just playing Gran Turismo Sport the other day, you can feel like it's very close, both in terms of gameplay and graphics. You can kind of feel the same sort of handling involved when they turn the car. You can hear almost the same sort of tire grip and engine sounds that you get from Gran Turismo Sport. So a lot of this is kind of just like lifted wholesale from Gran Turismo Sport. Now, I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but like Gran Turismo Sport probably wasn't 4K 60, like at least 60 locked, right, on the PlayStation 4 Pro. But it did run very well on the PS4 Pro, and even the base PS4. It runs pretty well. It runs like around 45, 60 frames a second. But you know, Gran Turismo 7, if they've just lifted it wholesale from Sport, I expect that the performance will be really, really good. I believe it'll be really good on the PlayStation 5. The PlayStation 5, the performance difference level is something like 4 to 5 times stronger than the base PlayStation 4, and at least twice as good as the PlayStation 4 Pro. And the other thing is, if they've lifted everything wholesale from Gran Turismo Sport, I believe the game will probably be out pretty quickly in the PlayStation 5's lifetime, which kind of goes to prove that you don't always have to wait until there's a console base before you release the game, unless you're like, you know, Grand Theft Auto 6, where you want to sell 100 million units. If you can release your game and then have it sell during the life of the console, as long as it's a good game, then you don't have to reduce the price too much. Now, Kazunori Yamauchi had a little message at the start of the segment, and he talked about, he mentioned the campaign mode. So this will be something that they've I guess put a lot of effort into, rather than the GT Sport mode, which is kind of just pushed in there. Even though I'm really grateful for them for putting the campaign mode in. This looks like they've designed a proper campaign mode for Gran Turismo 7. So that's Gran Turismo 7, and I would probably expect that really soon. I mean, if it's not going to be end of the year, because if it was end of the year, they probably would have said holiday 2020. It would probably be first half next year. Now, Sony kept on bringing out their big gun brands, and while Ratchet and Clank had a couple of games on the PlayStation 4, they did really well in the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 2 era, and now it looks like Insomniac are bringing them back for the PlayStation 5. And this trailer really showed off the capabilities of the PlayStation 5 SSD. So I can kind of see how Sony wanted to, I guess, show off a game that showed the SSD capabilities, and the way they did it in this game, while I really think it's quite like a blatant use of the how to maximize the SSD, and I hope that it's all the games who want to show off the SSD don't just go and do the same thing that this game is doing. Basically what they're doing is Ratchet and Clank are leaping into portals, and then they're going into new environments, and what you see is that in the past, games have needed to take a long loading times for them to draw in brand new landscapes and levels. And as you can see when you watch this trailer, you can see that there's literally no loading time. There might be like a second, but it's kind of already loaded in already, and that's probably due to the SSD being able to swap out assets really quickly between the hard drive and putting it into the memory. And I think while I don't see third parties really doing this type of thing, we'll probably see a lot of the Sony games try to maximize the use of their SSD this way, walking into brand new levels with no loading time. And that's kind of what I was saying before, how I don't want every game doing this, because then it will just become a case of developers forcing technology onto games that don't really need it. Not every game needs to load in brand new levels like instantly, but this trailer really showed what the SSD is capable of, being able to change worlds instantly. And you know, the other thing is that that's not to say Xbox Series X and the PC won't be able to do similar things, because it will. It just won't be as fast. And it looks like PlayStation 5 is up to 2 times faster than the Xbox Series X SSD. And also they have a special SSD controller, whereas the Xbox or the PC would have to do the same sort of task via CPU. So with this dedicated controller, it can prioritize and compress, so it can just do things a lot faster. But who knows if third parties are going to use this SSD. My gut feeling is that developers won't look to design their games differently in terms of, you know, making one type of game for making the same game for PlayStation 5 and making it differently on the Xbox Series X. They will go with some sort of baseline that they can do on both systems. So in the end, they may not use the SSD to the fullest extent, or if they do, you'll just see things load faster, and it will be a little bit slower on the Xbox Series X, but the game will end up being pretty much the same. And also with so Ratchet and Clank, the new game is called Rift Apart, and is made by Insomniac, and they showed off some of the gameplay, but like it was only about 15-20 seconds. It wasn't very much, and it looked like very similar Ratchet and Clank gameplay we've seen before on the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4. Now the next game that Sony showed was a game from Square Enix, and it was called Project Athia, and there's really not a whole lot to say about this, except that there was a message that said it was designed exclusively for the PlayStation 5. And we have like a female protagonist in a fantasy setting, and honestly there was really not that much more to say other than that. We don't know when it's coming out, so this is something that we just got to keep an eye on and to see what happens. So yeah, called Project Athia. The next game that was shown was called Stray, and it kind of looked like a sort of dystopian robot future, which is a kind of theme that seems really like a really people are really into now, especially with like Cyberpunk getting so much attention. I think a lot of developers are going for this aesthetic. We see a lot of like these dystopian worlds, science fiction worlds. But this one I think looks really cool, and you follow a cat as they walk around the city, and you can see here we've got some homeless robots and sort of lower class robots living in their home, and yeah, you're following this cat around here, and look at that on the bottom of the screen. In the center is one of those like Chinese cats that you might see in like Chinese stores. I think this looks interesting enough to keep an eye on. I like the look of it, but we don't really know too much about it other than the name Stray. Now, Sony, I guess Sony third party or second party, I don't know, but Housemarque, they developed Super Stardust HD, which was really popular on the PlayStation 3, and they also developed Resogun. So they're really good at, I guess, arcade shooters. They've come back and developed a game for the PlayStation 5, and it's called Returnal. And it's almost like a sort of psychological science fiction mashup. But it's not just like a psychological, I guess, adventure. It looks more like a third person action shoot 'em up. So imagine if you were playing Super Stardust HD but in third person. Now I don't have too many screenshots of this. You can go check out the trailer for yourself. But yeah, some of it looked like it was almost a Super Stardust type of kind of gameplay. And that's called Returnal. And I expect that to be PlayStation 5 exclusive for at least a little while because it's Housemarque. Wow, so the next game is from Sumo Digital, and in the past they've made one of my favorite games, Outrun 2, and they are doing a Sackboy, who you know from Little Big Planet, one of PlayStation's mascots. So Sackboy is in a sort of Super Mario World 3D and Tearaway mashup type of game, and actually that's kind of what we saw a lot of in the PlayStation 5 reveal today. We saw a lot of games that were like had their genres mashed up together, and this is just another one where it looks very, very clearly inspired by Super Mario 3D World, and if you've played that game, you kind of know that you have a ton of like well, it's almost like the same sort of perspective, like the isometric platformer perspective that is in 3D, but also in a way that the way that you traverse the level is kind of like in a 2D style. And the other thing is that with the new Sackboy game, you can play with, it looks like you will be able to play with 3 other friends in co-op on the same screen. So essentially, again, you can do the same thing what you could do on Super Mario 3D World. and the game will be called Sackboy: A Big Adventure. Now, I think this is really clever of Sony to provide a family type game, and it's in and the genre, the I guess platformer genre, really suits Sackboy, because when people purchase Little Big Planet, I feel like a lot of people dropped off Little Big Planet really fast because all they wanted to do was play a platforming game, and there was this whole creative aspect of Little Big Planet that people, I guess, they saw it and then they thought it was too difficult for them to create something, because there's two sides to gaming. There's one side, the very creative people, and then there's people who consume content. And so this seems like it suits people who consume content more. If now with Little Big Planet, you could play lots of people's levels, but I think people want a proper adventure that people can just play from start to finish without having to like look through different levels, see if they're good or not, and just rely on I guess ratings to tell them if it's a good level or not. People want like a campaign, so I think this is going to bring people what they want, and I think if it's priced reasonably well, if it's like $30, I think it will do really well. Now, one game that was hugely successful for PlayStation was Rocket League, primarily because when Rocket League first came out, it was given away for free on PlayStation Plus. We've seen Rocket League become hugely successful on every platform now, and it's a really fun game where people who just want to stuff around a little bit. And yes, there is the goal of getting the ball into the goal, but people can just have a lot of fun driving around and hooning around, hitting into each other, crashing into people. And that's what this next game, the developers are trying to do, at least what it looks like from the trailer. It looks like a Rocket League Destruction Derby sort of mashup, where you're just crashing into people, and I'm assuming the cars, they'll probably have some sort of like life bar of some sort, where you once you reduce it to nothing, then you win the game, something like that. But essentially this is just like a big arena where you're just trying to like hoon around and smash into people, and for some people that's a really good night out, good night in, I should say. And so it's looking to cater to the Rocket League crowd, I think. And the game's called Destruction Allstars. I don't know if it has any relation to PlayStation All-Star. There was a fighting game that was a little bit like Super Smash Brothers. I don't know if it has any relation to that in terms of developer. I would be surprised if it did. But actually, if this was PlayStation exclusive, then they could have gone with like the PlayStation mascots, like when you're able to select your character, you would be able to select like Nathan Drake or Ratchet or Jack. And that would have been pretty cool if they had a PlayStation All-Stars, Destruction All-Stars type of game. I was really surprised by the next game. When I looked at it, I thought maybe it looked like a sort of Avatar: The Legend of Korra game mixed with Dragon Quest, especially this type of art style with these little fairy things. It had a very Dragon Quest type of vibe. And what they ended up revealing was, while it's going for that Legend of Korra and Dragon Quest aesthetic. The game really plays like Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Right down to the way that she's jumping around, to the way that she hits her enemies, to the way that she shoots her bow and arrow. Everything about this looks like a Zelda game to me. And actually, you know, I would be astonished if it wasn't. And the game looks really good. It looks like a Dragon Quest game, cross Zelda. Now, I just hope that they don't have those destructible weapons that disintegrate within like 5 goes, because that really annoyed me in Zelda Breath of the Wild. If they get rid of that, then I think this will be a low-key indie game to watch. I think this could end up doing really well, because this is the one type of game that is not that the PlayStation never had. They always wanted a Zelda game and they never had it. You know, they had things like Demon Souls, but it wasn't really Zelda. And this is probably as close as it gets. Now, you could say that it's a complete direct copy of Zelda, but I'm sure it's going to have its own little quirks. And I think, well, actually, I don't even know if it's PlayStation 5 exclusive, but Sony should really if the game turns out to do really well, Sony really need to I guess acquire or make them exclusive to the PlayStation, I guess, stable of games. So the game's called Kena Bridge of Spirits, and it looks like PlayStation Zelda game. The next game is called Goodbye Volcano High. Now, they didn't really show too much of this, except it really gave me that Life is Strange vibe of going to school and dealing with issues while you're I guess, teenager. There's not a whole lot more that I know about this game. The art style certainly is very interesting, with that sort of 2D cartoon anime style mixed with the 3D environment. So I think this is definitely one for the Life is Strange folk, people who like that sort of Life is Strange type game. So yeah, it's called Goodbye Volcano High. Now, the next game they show was Oddworld. The full name is Oddworld Soulstorm, and actually I don't recall if Oddworld was on PlayStation 3 or PlayStation 4 at all. So it's almost like they're bringing back a franchise from the PlayStation 2 days. I saw a lot of comments that said, who's playing Oddworld these days? And to tell you the truth, I don't really know. But Lorne Lanning, the original creator, is behind the new version of Oddworld. And, you know, the trailer looks okay. But ultimately, I think you already know if you're an Oddworld fan or not. Because it has such a distinctive alien-like art style. You either like or dislike the art style. If the main character doesn't appeal to you, then I don't know if you would be into the game. You could read a great review about it, but you probably still wouldn't get into the game because the art style is so distinctive. So Oddworld is coming to PlayStation 5. I don't know if it's exclusive. I'm assuming it probably won't be. But yeah, there's another game to look forward to. The next game was fronted by Shinji Mikami, creator of Resident Evil and director of Resident Evil 4. And he also made The Evil Within. So he formed his own company later on. He left Capcom and formed his own company to create The Evil Within, and now his company is doing another game called Tokyo Ghostwire, and it looks like it's a first-person style game, and they're out in I guess they're out in the city of Tokyo, and they're battling headless schoolgirl monsters. It seems like Shinji Mikami wants to get back into his action roots, and I don't know how much horror this is going to have inside it, aside from the actual theme of it and using ghosts. It looks more like a horror action game to me, especially with the way that they cut the trailer. It was just full of action the whole time. It's called Ghostwire Tokyo, coming 2021 from Shinji Mikami. The next game is from IO Interactive, and they make Hitman, and the next game that they're making is called Hitman III. Agent 47 is, and they said that this will be the final part of the trilogy. So Agent 47 is going to Dubai. They said it was some gameplay, but it was more like in-game footage. It didn't really look like anyone was playing the game. It just looked very cinematic. So I guess you can see the level of quality in terms of their graphics, but aside from that, you can't really make out too much from the actual gameplay from what was shown. Now, on the PlayStation 4 VR headset, Astro Boy was really popular, and they showed off a little clip of the new Astro Boy, but they didn't actually say if it was in VR or not. So a lot of people, even people in the industry, are commentators, influencers, are asking whether it's in VR or not. And perhaps you could use the old VR headset with the PlayStation 5. It's unknown at this stage, but Astro Boy was only available in VR. It would be quite surprising if this was just a PS5 game that had no VR in it. So if I'm going to make a prediction, I predict that the PS5 will be able to use the old PSVR headset, and this game will be able to be used in VR mode. Now, this is a game that hardcore fans have been asking for since forever, and if you know this guy, then you already know what the game is. This is Demon's Souls, and it was a very early PlayStation 3 game, which was like the forefather from the Dark Souls series. So From Software made this game first, before they made Dark Souls, and before Dark Souls became really popular. And basically, essentially, Demon's Souls, Dark Souls, it's the same type of game with the same gameplay. The only difference is that in Demon's Souls, each level was separate and wasn't part of a open world, whereas Dark Souls, it was completely open world. All the levels were interconnected, which also had a problem because while they did have a central location, the filing shrine of some sorts, traversing Dark Souls ended up getting a little bit tedious before you got the fast travel option. Whereas with Demon's Souls, you didn't have that because you had the main cathedral area where you just portaled in and out to, and you'd go straight to each level. And once you beat the level, you'd come back to the cathedral area and before you go to the next level. But Demon's Souls, if you haven't played it, the PS5 would be the best time to do so, because it seems like they've made it from the ground up. Everything looks this looks completely different, and the developer behind this is Bluepoint Games, and they made The Last Guardian, the remake. Did they do The Last Guardian? They've been doing a lot of the HD ports and on PlayStation. So it's good to know that they're handling this game. They're one of the best in the business, and I'm sure they'll do a worthwhile remake of Demon's Souls. Now, this was a major announcement. This is a game from Capcom, and you probably know what this is already, judging by the screenshots. This is a sequel to Resident Evil 7. This is Resident Evil 8, and it's going to be called Village. Now, I don't know if they're going to call it Village Resident Evil 8 or Resident Evil 8 Village, but there was quite a lengthy trailer, mainly showing off the story points, and one of Resetera's members, Dust Golem, who I'll link to in below, he gave a really long description of what Resident Evil 8 is about on his Twitter feed. I'll link that. But it looks like it's kind of set in a similar, I guess, area to Resident Evil 7, and it's going to be the sequel to 7. Even though 7 was like in some sort of like haunted house, this one looks like it's got that sort of Resident Evil 4 vibe. Like in Resident Evil 4, you go to that village first. This is the vibe that this gives, but a sequel to Resident Evil 7. And also, I don't know who this is, but I feel like this is Claire Redfield. Somebody tell me who this is. Claire Redfield, people were worried that Claire, who was in Resident Evil 2, but not in any other game, would never come back. And maybe this is her. So now we know that her brother, Chris Redfield, is in the game, and Ethan is in the game. So Ethan, I believe, is in Resident Evil 7. Also, I haven't played 7. I've only played 2. So I don't know too much about 7. Now, yes, so Chris Redfield, her brother, is in the game because Ethan mentions his name in the trailer. So who knows? This could probably be Claire Redfield. And Resident Evil Village, it will be 2021. Now, the final game that they showed off was easily their most impressive, and you could say that a lot of the other games, they could be possible in PlayStation 4 if they were, I guess, cut down somewhat. And I even saw some commenters say that, these kind of look like nicer PlayStation 4 games. Well, that's kind of true to a certain extent. Nobody can really say that Horizon Zero Dawn 2 doesn't fully look like a next-gen game. When you look at this in motion, and when you look at the level of detail in each shot, the way that they've got so much vegetation, so much movement in each shot from everything, like from the wind, the lighting, even the fog, the volumetric fog in the area, the shadowing in the grass, moving parts in the background. There's just so much in each shot of Horizon Zero Dawn 2 that it just looks like a huge leap. It definitely looks like a 2x, 3x time better performance game than something on the PS4. And yeah, this looks wild to me. Horizon Zero Dawn 2. This is easily one of the best looking games that is out there right now. Better than Cyberpunk 2077. This really looks next gen. If you see one trailer, yeah, just go and check Horizon Zero Dawn 2 out. Now, I didn't play Horizon Zero Dawn 1. I've got a copy of it. Maybe it's time for me to like boot it up and have a go. But I think Horizon Zero Dawn 2 gives that moment. You know, like back in the old days, we had MGS2, and people kept on watching the trailer over and over again because they just couldn't believe how good it looked. I don't think this is at this level, but yeah, this was easily better than everything else in the showcase today. I would say that this Ratchet and Clank were probably the most impressive games that they showed today. Would I buy the PlayStation 5? After the showcase today, well, first of all, I think if you want to compare the PlayStation 5 showcase to the Inside Xbox showcase a month ago, there's really no comparison. Like when I said I enjoyed the Inside Xbox showcase, yeah, I thought those were pretty cool games that they announced. But PlayStation 5, they went for the brand names. They went for like Spider-Man and Gran Turismo and Ratchet and Clank, Horizon Zero Dawn, Resident Evil. So they really went all out, brought their brand name recognition. And I worry a little bit for Microsoft because, you know, when people have no information to decide on their console, they're probably just going to go, well, okay, well, I've got these type of games on this system, so I'm going to buy that. And doesn't matter like what power you have. I said it in my Microsoft feature that I did the other day. It's not about the hardware. And the PlayStation 5, even though they has slightly less power in terms of GPU capability, you wouldn't know. You can't tell that Horizon Zero Dawn because you can't compare it to anything on the Xbox Series X. So if you're going to have all of that horsepower, it doesn't make a difference in the end if you have the exclusives. And PlayStation 5, they showed you right up top, you know, Spider-Man, Gran Turismo, Ratchet and Clank. You can't play those games on the Xbox. Now, one cool thing about the Xbox is that yes, they have pretty cool backwards compatibility, but they're really lacking in the exclusives. So right now, if you could only buy one, the PlayStation 5 is making a really strong case to buy it over the Xbox Series X. Now, we really have to wait until next month because Microsoft are going to do another game showcase in July. But I get the feeling that they're leaving it a bit late because normally E3 is in June, and this is a little bit concerning. They should have known that if PlayStation 5 are going to have a showcase, then they really also need to have a showcase, just like if they had a imaginary E3 at this time. They really needed to bring something out at the same time so people can make counterpoints to PlayStation 5. It doesn't make sense to give PlayStation 5 a month of free I guess promotion. Now, obviously PlayStation 5 also did this with Xbox, but you know, what they did was with the Inside Xbox showcase, they had a counterpoint to that when they showed off that Unreal Engine demo, which they teased out for an entire month. And for the entire month, people were talking more about the Unreal Engine demo than the Inside Xbox showcase. So Microsoft, you need a counterpoint to this inside Xbox. Microsoft need a counterpoint to this PS5 game showcase. Like they need to say something to get people interested in their console, and I'm worried that they're probably not going to do it. Now, would I buy the PlayStation 5 based on the showcase that they showed there? I would say that I really want a PS5 for Gran Turismo because I'm a huge racing fan, and Horizon Zero Dawn 2 alone would get my money because it looks so good. In the past you would buy a console because you'd get that awesome looking game that you don't know what it's really about, but you go and buy it anyway because it looks damn good. So that's Horizon Zero Dawn 2. But would I buy it just for 2 games at the moment? I'm not so sure. I'm still sitting on the fence on this one. I think that we really have to wait and see. I don't really like the design of the PlayStation 5, the actual look of the console. So maybe I'll wait for the slim version in a couple of years. But honestly, like as a general rule, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to buy a console at launch. I don't think it's going to be too much different this time around because things are way overpriced. Every game is going to cost $60, and there's going to be no discounts or anything. You're going to be paying the full price of this PlayStation 5. It's not like we don't have any other games to play. We've got tons of games like on PS4 and PC and, oh my goodness, everywhere else. So in terms of need, no, I don't need a PlayStation 5 right now. And yeah, unless you are completely starved of games, or you work in the games industry and you want a PlayStation 5 desperately, I would probably tell people out there to sit and wait. I know that doesn't sound very interesting, but well, if you're concerned about your money, like and that's why you need advice, then I would say probably to sit and wait a little bit. Now with the PlayStation 3, I remember like that when that came out, that was $999 in Australia, and I think it was 600 USD in the US. My brother bought a PlayStation 3, and I had spent 750 Australian on the PlayStation 2 at launch. But I skipped the PS3 because I really felt like at that time that it was just a little bit too expensive and not enough games on the system. So I waited until the PS3 Slim came out about 2 years down the line and got it for about 500 Australian, which is about 300 USD. And I think $299 USD is about the right price to get a console. So whenever that price appears. Now Sony with the PS4, they came out with the PS4 at $399, and that was good enough price for me to accept at launch for the PS4. So I bought the PS4 at launch, and I didn't end up getting the PS4 Pro. I thought about it, but there just weren't enough games, and I didn't have a 4K TV anyway. And I wouldn't play in 4K because I knew it was kind of underpowered, and I don't really like 30 FPS games. I'd much rather play 1080p 60 frames per second, and yeah, so I didn't really wasn't really interested in the PS4 Pro, except for just making other older games better. Like all the Yakuza games would have played better on the PS4 Pro. But with the PS5, yeah, I think this is looking like it's at least $499. I don't think it's going to be $399. I would be astonished if it was $399. If it was $399, then the console race would be over, and PS5 would win, because I don't think the Xbox Series X could be $399. And I think if it's $4.99, maybe it will be like $4.99 for the discless version, and then for the disc version it will be like $5.99. So maybe that's the way they're going to do it. If you really want retail discs, you can pay $5.99 for it. Because remember, in the past with the PS4, the CPU was lower and a lot lower spec than any type of PC, and the GPU was more like a mid-tier PC when it came out. Now what we've got is like mid-tier CPU and GPU in the system. I just feel like it's probably not going to be $3.99 based on the specs. So I think I think PS5 had a really strong showcase today. Now, there were some other games that I didn't mention that I've cut out. So there were things like NBA 2K21, there was Godfall, there was the Far Shore. There were a few other games. I'll list them all down below. But it was a little bit pointless for me to like show a couple of screenshots for them and not be able to say anything at them at all if I wasn't interested. And I didn't know enough about them aside from whatever they showed in the trailer, so I just left them out. Overall, I think they had a really good show. It probably went on for like about 15 minutes too long. They really needed to cut some of those games that I didn't talk about. They should have just cut them out and then just leave them as games that they show on their YouTube channel. I think, but aside from that, they did a really good job selling the console, and specifically they went after like things like exclusives and brand recognition for the PlayStation 5, which I've already said that is imperative to get sales. And that's what they're doing. They're not talking about like how powerful it is. They're talking about why you want to buy one. They had a really good show. So I think that's probably going to do it for this episode of the JimRPG Show. So remember, if you guys like the video, be sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel. Now, I just want to plug a couple of other things. Please go back and check my last couple of videos on Sony. I did say that there's a video titled "The Last of Sony," why Sony should be concerned about the PS5. That concern is a lot less now that I've seen their showcase. I'm really impressed with what they showed, and it seems like the developers they're going to be bringing out games a lot sooner than what happened with the PS3 and PS4 generation, because essentially the PS4 was a new architecture from PS3, so like all of their first party developers that were on PS3 had to relearn how to do it in PS4. So I can see why it took a little longer on PS3 and PS4, and now PS5 is the architecture is almost like the transition is extremely smooth. Essentially on the PS4 they were just developing on an x86 architecture, and it was essentially the same, and now it's kind of like an upgraded PS4. So that's probably why we're seeing games come out much earlier in the life cycle of the PS5. And so yeah, please check that video out. I do say a lot of things that are still relevant. I would say that my concern is a lot less now for the PS5, and PS5 is looking really strong. Now with the Microsoft video, I said that it's not about the hardware, and it's true. Microsoft really need to show that they can show the games for their system. And aside from that, I think we didn't come out with a video this week, but I've been busy writing about the video a video about Nintendo Switch. There's probably going to be 2 videos on the Nintendo Switch, so I guess it's kind of like looking at Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, looking at everything as a whole. So I look forward to that video coming out, and I just finished Yakuza Kiwami 2, so there'll be a review of that hopefully pretty soon on the channel. So that's probably it for now. Thanks for watching again, and I'll see you guys in the next one.